Life is what binds all things in the universe together. But what happens after it's over? Where do we go? And what was the meaning to everything we live and have lived through? To be honest, no one really knows for sure. But today, we're going to share our 2 cents on the matter and discuss some facts of what scientists, philosophers, and religions think about the meaning of life, immortality, and life after death. Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of Tipplers 2 Cents. My name is Chris Walters, and joining me as always is the magnificent and graceful Sean Knox.
Oh, it's good to be back, guys. How you doing?
Thank you all for sticking with us to episode 3. We appreciate you guys. Once again, we'd like to ask for you for your continued support in spreading the word about our show here. Even just telling one person about it does much more than you think. And just don't forget to leave a review on whatever platform it is that you listen to us on. But aside from that, let's just go ahead and dive right into today's episode. Sean, do you have any updates to share with the listeners before we move on?
Yeah, a little bit. Oh, I actually have a couple from Brett Meeks. Not really updates as much as suggestions. He wants us to do an episode later on about Skinwalker Ranch. Apparently, that's a pretty interesting topic. He didn't really go in on how much is it involved with, but he was saying, like UFOs, rifts in time, a bunch of crazy shit. So, yeah, Brett, we'll definitely look into it, and we kind of already have our roadmap set for this season, but, it sounds like a good episode 11.
The roadmap that we have, though, isn't set. So, I mean, if there's something that pops up that interests both of us, we could always plug and play as needed. And I have heard about that Skinwalker Ranch somewhere. Don't know where, but that sounds familiar. So I'll look into it, and, more than sure that we can make an episode out of that.
And also, what's his name? A friend of ours, Dustin, he recommended... not Mexican Dustin, that's another friend of ours, but our sister's boyfriend, he recommended us doing a episode on Bermuda Triangle because it goes a lot into really big conspiracy things like crystal pyramids and Atlantis and shit like that, which honestly those are episodes all in their own, so of course we will do one on Bermuda Triangle sometime in the future.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to want to cover that one.
Yeah. All right, and that's pretty much it. Go ahead, Chris.
Right. Well, cool. Let's get into what we're drinking today. Today, I'm drinking Coors. I'm not proud of that. Taking a little bit of a step backwards as far as beer goes, but it's 2020. Times are tough, and beer isn't cheap. Sean, what are you slamming down your gum hole?
You're a fucking asshole. For those of you who don't know, I don't have fucking teeth, and
so now he's got a gum hole.
Yeah. I'm just drinking more Suntory whiskey, but I can't. Well, not that I can't drink beer, but I've been getting headaches after I drink beer. But if I drink just liquor, I seem to be fine. So I just poured myself a triple of Suntory whiskey. So
cool. Yeah. Well. I feel like today's episode requires a drink, just to wrap your head around, because we're talking about life and everything about it. So obviously it goes without saying that this is going to be, kind of a heavy subject for some people. But I promise we're going to try to do our best to make it less depressing than it sounds. Also, probably just a good thing to mention, we will be touching on some religious stuff and their beliefs. So it should go without saying that some of you are probably not going to agree with some things that are said or whatever. But just the point is, if you're easily offended and you get your jimmies in a bunch, just move along. We don't we can't cater to all the sensitive people. So if you're oversensitive, just move along.
Yeah, and we're also not super educated on each of these subjects either. So if you ever do want to update us, you always can. We're available on plenty of platforms and ways to message us. So
yeah, and I also just should go without saying though, I don't want to be ignorant. So if I do say something ignorant, feel free to reach out and let me know if I did. That's fine. Anyway, let's crack open our drinks here. And as always, take a little toast. Just to everybody else's prosperity and hopefully more success for the show. Yep. Cheers.
Cheers.
Oh. All right.
Jesus Christ. I just drank way too fucking much. Okay.
All right, well, without further delay, let's get right into today's topics. The meaning of life, immortality, and life after death. We all come into the world the same way, and to recognize this event, we celebrate it every year as we get older. Of course, I'm talking about birthdays, the celebration of one's birth and rejoicing that we made it another year. Some might ask, why do we celebrate this? What makes this event so special? Well, if you do ask those questions, you should probably see a therapist, you depressed fuck, because that's some really big sad boy shit. No, I'm joking. Honestly, it's a fair question to ask, because when you think about it, birthdays are a bit redundant. You're literally celebrating the exact same thing every single year. And to be fair, the more you celebrate them, the less significant they seem, and the less happy you ultimately feel when they come around. For example, the 40th birthday is a big hump for many to get over mentally. Many people associate that with being the year that they are officially labeled as old by the younger generations. Now, obviously, before any of you get offended, that's subject to one's own opinion. But the fact remains that as the years go on, we no longer look forward to birthdays like we used to. So, why is this birthday talk even important? Well, birthdays are important to bring up because of the simple fact that it is an annually performed ritual practiced worldwide, and it's all done to celebrate one thing no one can explain: life. And for me, in a lot of ways, birthdays are a good basis for how I think the general population feels and thinks about life. We recognize that with each year, we inch ourselves closer to death's door, but we also learn so much along the way, and that experience is very much to be celebrated. It is also, it signifies one simple fact. We're all just happy to be here. Now, Sean, how do you feel about birthdays? Do you find yourself looking forward to them as they come, or does it give you anxiety to think about the next birthday?
I mean, I look forward to my birthday every year, but generally I'm let down, and that's not anyone else's fault. It's just now that I'm at a point where I look at my birthday as a day to look back on my achievements of the previous year. And I'm a lot better than I was 4 to 5 years ago. But in the spectrum of where I want to be, there has been much to report up until I released a couple of songs and started this podcast with Chris. Of course, now I'm even panicking when I look back because I know what will eventually get me, and that is Big Daddy Death. Overall, I think most people either think of birthdays as depressing or days where they get to act like entitled dickholes. And as far as how you were saying, it kind of goes into like thinking more of the older you get and each birthday you get to, people don't really want to celebrate them because they don't want to acknowledge the fact that they're getting older. Yeah. And fuck, honestly, nowadays I'm seeing some millennials have trouble with even turning 30. I mean, I'm 22 and Chris is 27, and like even nowadays, like we're pretty fucking aware of our mortality, and I think that's a weird insurgence or whatever for millennials in general that prior generations didn't really seem to be bothered with up until 40. So it's just interesting to think of it that way.
Yeah, I think the reason why, and it's kind of why birthdays are a little bit of more of a somber subject than they are a happy thing. It's because, we kind of calculate how we're doing in life by our birthdays. We kind of use those as milestones for our success. So, the way I see it right now, I'm 27, because of just so much shit that's gone on this year. I'm unemployed, and just it's been a downhill year for me. And when I'm looking at it as a milestone, I have the 30-year mark coming up, and I have nothing to show for it. So that's why it starts to get depressing as you look forward to these birthdays, because you start getting more and more stressed about where you need to be in life, at least as far as, for what you think of, success and everything like that. And I think, millennials especially were people that are really driven to be like successful in stuff that we do. So I think that might be why a lot of people feel the same way. They just kind of see that as a milestone. Like 30 is a pretty big milestone in somebody's life, and we're growing up in a hard time. Once again, look at 2020. We have a lot going on this year. It's a rough year for everybody. So to be almost 30 and having this kind of stuff going on, it definitely impacts where you're going to be at with your life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things. Like I said, I'm a lot better than I was 5 years ago. For those of you who don't know, we can always get into this later, but the condensed version is I was a drug addict, and a lot of things happened that turned my life around, and overall, it's very good where I am right now. I have my own place, I have my own apartment, I have a job, but in the spectrum of success for everyone else, I compare it to really high standards, or I put it on a very high pedestal, and I don't know why. And a lot of people are content with working the job that they're good at, or just climbing the ladder at whatever job it is they're at. But I'm so fucking not interested in those. So whenever I actually think back on my achievements, I'm happy of where I am with my family, but I'm not happy of where I am in life. And certain things which I do want to talk about later, probably at the ass end of the show, about being content and stuff like that. But that's probably the biggest thing that people have problems with coping with death, is because almost everybody's not content with how their life went, or where they ended up. Like even the richest motherfuckers, one of my idols, me and Chris's idols, Chester Bennington, committed suicide a couple of years ago, and I have no fucking idea why he would do that, and no one else will. But that's just proof that he wasn't content with his life, and he was very successful. I mean, he owned a shit ton of tattoo shops called Club Tattoo. He made an empire for himself from his hometown, and it's super impressive. And outside looking in, nobody can understand it, and except him. And I don't want to be put in that position, or rather, honestly, I'd rather just be in the position to be like, you know what, I want to be successful regardless, because I want to make sure that if I do make that choice, which, by the way, I don't think I am suicidal, especially not right now, but with those kind of things on my mind, I want to make sure that if I leave unexpectedly, or whatever, I want to make sure that my family's taken care of. That includes my daughter, my mom, my baby mama, Chris, my sister, and I'm pretty sure Chris probably thinks the same way.
Yeah. We'll get further into that stuff a little later, but staying along the lines of birthdays.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. We went on a little bit of a tangent. This episode is probably going to be filled with a lot of that kind of stuff. But along the lines of birthdays, I'm going to fill your head with some useless facts about them that you can, use to impress your grandparents, or a lonely history professor or something. I don't know. Use this information as you will. But if this information gets you laid, I want to hear about it, because I'm weird like that. Now then, the origin of the birthday. Bet you didn't think there needed to be an origin for such a thing, but there is. Many researchers believe that the first birthdays were practiced by the Egyptians because, of course, the Egyptians are so fucking edgy that they're basically the hipsters of their time. Because, seriously, I can't research a damn thing without the Egyptians coming up. I'm going to be doing research on Starbucks or some shit one day, and it's going to be like, the ancient Egyptians actually invented the Starbucks in 2200 BCE.
Didn't the Egyptians invent fucking vibrators?
They probably fucking did. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it had something to do with like Cleopatra and like filling this like thing with bees, and then just
I swear to God about that too. But okay, back on track. The Egyptians were thought to be the first people to celebrate birthdays starting around 3000 BCE, though it was not like traditional birthdays that we celebrate now. Instead, they performed birthday ceremony as more of like a celebration for their pharaohs becoming gods, because they used to believe that their pharaohs were literal like divine beings back then.
Mm-hmm.
So the common folk didn't really start celebrating their birthdays until later, and this was mostly, like I said, a reserved practice for pharaohs. But eventually, the ancient Greeks adopted this practice and found obvious influence from the Egyptians, because their celebrations also included their gods. But it was about the individual, but it also had to do with their gods. The Greeks believed that their god was present with them on the day of their birth. So on their birthday, it wasn't, just to celebrate their life, but also to like celebrate whatever god it was that they worshipped. And that sort of brings us to the next thing that I was wanting to get into, which is religion and like how it influences our lives. But just before we depart on the birthday subject, I want to give you one more useless fact. So the reason we use candles on our cakes for when we're doing birthdays and stuff is actually because of the Greeks and the way that they celebrated their birthdays. The candles were used as a way to communicate with their gods, and also as like a form of protection from evil spirits. So the whole blowing out the candles thing that we do now, that was because of them. They would blow the candles out as a way of like finishing their prayer or their little protection ritual, and it was a way of like sending the message to the god that they were communicating with. So now you know that. So you're welcome.
So the flame was more like an ethereal microphone, essentially?
Yeah, basically, candles always have like kind of a place in religious practices. So they just kind of used it as a way to signify like, hey, I'm done with my message. Shooting you a text, Zeus.
That's pretty cool.
But anyway, let's move on to religion and its influence on life. And by that, I don't want to discuss the like ideologies or opinions on religion itself, because we'll save that for another time, but just more so how it affects us in life in general. So Sean, why don't you take the lead for a minute, because I need to take a drink.
Yeah. Religion, as many of you know, is a huge factor in how many of us go about our day-to-day lives. This has been the way it is for nearly all of human life. In fact, according to Pew Research Center's 2012 survey of 230 countries and territories, 84% of those surveyed were reported to be affiliated with a religion, leaving only 16% not affiliated. In simpler terms, the majority of people in the world are religious. With those who practice religion fervently, it obviously plays a huge part in who they are and how they view life. Nearly, if not all, religious peoples believe in some sort of afterlife, which we'll discuss further later on. But it's this afterlife that drives religious people to be, in general, a good person. The basis for entering a deity's kingdom in the afterlife is usually reserved for those who both A, worshipped and respected said deity in their life, or B, was generally a decent person. So for many, the meaning of life might be solely to worship and praise their God, and as a result, earn a better afterlife for themselves. Some might simply wish to worship their God for everything they believe he or she has provided them in their life. But what about those who don't practice religion? They obviously can't be hoping for the same thing. Can they? I mean, maybe not exactly. There are, in fact, other things non-religious people choose to live for and believe in as far as an afterlife. Reincarnation, for example, is one such afterlife many non-religious people tend to believe in. And we'll get into reincarnation more in a little bit.
Yeah, and before we go any further, let's go ahead and share our thoughts on what the meaning of life is for us. I want to get what your perspective is on this, and I do realize that it's a broad question to ask, but I think that's what makes the question so appealing, is because, it's open-ended, and obviously it's opinionated. There's no facts to go off of. There's no definitive answer, and each person's answer is going to, differ from the next. So for you, ideally, what brings meaning to your life? What do you think brings purpose to it? And what do you believe is the reason for our existence?
Well, for those of you who don't know, I'm an atheist, so I'm leaning a little on the side of science, and that of that of there is no definitive purpose or meaning of life except to fuck, reproduce, and keep the species alive. However, with the better side of society who actually thinks about their future before they let each other dump some gravy in the gumbo pot and make some non-contributing fucking evolutionary obstacles that a lot of inconsiderate side of society calls children, I think the gene pool is pretty fucking polluted. My point is when I look down the path of our evolutionary road, it looks grim, and that's why I default to find something you're passionate about and just go for it and doing it in the way that you deem most moral. Even if you don't achieve what you wanted to, although you tried with all your might, because that's simply just how life is sometimes. I would find comfort in dying, knowing that I tried my best to be a good person, and that my family and friends knew that too. Live a good life. If there are gods and they are just, they will not care how devout you have been, but will welcome you based on the virtues you have lived by. If there are gods but unjust, then you should not want to worship them. If there are no gods, then you will be gone, but will have lived a noble life that will live on in the memories of your loved ones. And that was Marcus Aurelius. And that quote actually helped me a lot with thinking about my mortality. So I figured you guys could think about that as well.
Yeah, and on the opposite side of that, I consider myself religious, but I'm also scientific, so it's like I'm a weird combo in there somewhere. Because I do believe that there is a God and everything, but I think about it in like a scientific sense, and it's kind of hard to explain. But for me, the meaning of life is just simply to make the most of it. I think the fact that none of us knows what happens afterward is all the better reason to just live life to the fullest and own each moment as it comes to you. Go out and do every single thing you ever wanted to. Because, a lot of people, like myself included, we hold ourselves back from doing many things in life that we want to do out of fear of failure. But, I'd rather try something and fail than to never get a chance to try, because I would hate to be on my deathbed wishing I had done something I could have. But not only that, I think it's also just to help others live their best life. There's really no better feeling than when you help someone or, you make someone really happy. It's really just one of the best feelings in the world. And I think if we all just tried to do the best things for one another, we'd all be much happier. And I know I just described like a fairy tale world because the one we live in is filled with fucking murderers and rapists and terrorists and people who only seek to hurt and cause misery to others. But honestly, it's not really a crazy thing to ask for when you like really sit down and analyze it. But that's aside from the point. The meaning of life for me is just life. Live it. Really, live it. That said, I also live entirely for my daughter. I'd give anything and do anything for her. So, like how you were saying in the previous episode, like your daughter's your whole life, can't imagine a world without her. Like that's how I feel too.
Yeah.
And that kind of gives me some purpose. But I also kind of think that kind of plays into how I was saying, just, help others live their best life because, I want to give my daughter my best life, or her best life, I mean. But anyway, we want to know your guys' thoughts on this too, all you listeners. So shoot us an email at tipplers2centspodcast@gmail.com and let us know what you think the meaning of life is because, like I said, it's subjective. There's nothing but opinions to base on this, so we would love to hear about it. But let's go back to the topic of religion and how that affects our lives. I brought up that the desire to ascend to a good afterlife was a major factor, or you did rather. However, coincidentally, the desire to not go to a worse afterlife, for example, hell, is also a major factor. And you might be thinking, like, well, doesn't that mean the same thing? I mean, if I want to go to heaven, I obviously don't want to go to hell. And you might be right, but there is the simple fact that some, if not many, people will simply be good to others and worship God just to avoid the risk of going to hell. Now, if you can't understand the difference between those 2 points, you might want to self-reflect on your beliefs because they're vastly different. It's the difference between somebody who does their best and somebody who just does, just enough. It's the same thing. Why even bring this up? Well, again, it greatly affects the value someone could see in their life. In my opinion, if somebody is only being just good enough to try to not go to hell, they're probably not that great of a person to be around, because I'd imagine that they are very self-centered and only try to better themselves. And then obviously this just contrasts with the way I see value in life, so that's why I bring that up.
Yeah, I mean, respect when people try to better themselves, but I respect when people try to better themselves. I don't like when people default to religion simply not to bring joy to themselves by bringing joy to others, but because they're afraid to go to hell. And like I'm sure you can visualize it. Plenty of movies and shit like that probably displayed that, like having like a serial killer get into a confessional at like a Catholic church, and forgive me, Father, I have sinned. And that's kind of why they do that, is because it's like the hypocrisy. They really only confess just because, um, they think that it's what's the word, um, bringing them redemption.
Yeah,
And
repenting.
Yeah, and repenting. Thank you. And I don't like when a lot of people, not giving you shit if you've been to prison, but a lot of people that go to prison default to religion, and I can understand that it's probably a fucking super shitty situation, but a lot of these people that I've known personally get out of prison, and they'll pretty much go back right to what they were fucking doing after just getting out and saying, oh, I've got it all turned around, my life's all about God now, and that'd be good if they'd actually fucking stick with it, but 9 times out of 10 they don't.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about reincarnation now. Chris, if you could give us a definition of what reincarnation is, that'd be great.
Yep, sure thing. A reincarnation is a type of flower. Its scientific name is Dianthus carophyllus, which means flower of love or flower of the gods, and they make great bouquets for pissed off girlfriends, or to like leave on a gravestone for a deceased loved one.
Fucking hate you.
Yeah, I'm joking. What I was talking about there was a carnation, not to be confused with reincarnation, and also not to be confused with a what-incarnation, because that's just utter nonsense. Okay, for realsies. Reincarnation is the belief that when you die, your soul will be reborn into a new body. And there are actually many different interpretations of reincarnation, with some believing that you come back as a plant, or an insect, or some other type of living thing, while others believe you just come back as another person and begin life anew. So I will say that even though I view myself as a religious person, I am open to the idea of reincarnation. I don't hold your typical beliefs of God, so I can think outside the box a little bit more than, say you're a hardcore Christian. To me, the reason I think that this seems possible is because I think about it in kind of a somewhat scientific level. And like I said, again, even though I'm religious, I'm not ignorant. I believe in science. I'm only mentioning that so no one tries to question me on my beliefs or whatever. But, okay, anyway, I believe that if reincarnation were to be possible, it would be on like a cellular level. Because when we die, our bodies decompose and break down into tinier and tinier bits of, our former selves. And it's my belief that if one were to be reincarnated, it would be from the like reformation of your previous cells or DNA and all that stuff. Now, obviously, I'm like no scientist, and this theory isn't sound, but to me, on a base level, at least, that makes sense. So I think you could be reincarnated in a sense, though you would have like no consciousness of your former self or anything like that. I don't think you would even probably be another human. I'm more of the belief that you have a better chance of coming back as like a plant or something, or like maybe even a microorganism, as opposed to like a full-bodied insect or animal or person.
So you don't think that we can come back as like anal beads or some shit?
Well, I mean, I'd like to imagine that we could. It just, well, whose? This might change
DiCaprio.
if I believe it or not.
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Leonardo? Then yes, I think I believe that now.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
But as far as the main spread belief of reincarnation, there are religions who believe this as well, namely like Buddhism Hinduism, Islam, the Greeks, Egyptians, again, and even Christianity. So you get it, a lot of religions. Most of their beliefs in reincarnation, however, tie into the beliefs about their afterlife. Reincarnation in itself can be specified as its own sort of religious belief, as there are those who believe it happens to the spirit, as previously mentioned, though they don't hold any religious beliefs. But what about you, Sean? What's your thoughts on reincarnation?
I mean, the basis of it, that I understand anyway, is mostly to do with your karmic slate. So if you were a shitty person, then you would come back as, Seth Rogen's anal beads. If you're a good person, you'd come back as Anne Hathaway's anal beads. But but I mean, I do kind of like that idea. As far as it's still kind of in the realm of heaven and hell. It's the same thing that's going to happen. It's not you necessarily being tortured. It's just if you were a beautiful person, you might come back as a butterfly. If you were a fucking shitty person, you might come back as a fucking cockroach. And I really like that idea. I don't think of course this is all based on faith and belief and stuff. So I mean, I don't think it's real, but I do think it's a really beautiful sentiment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things that it's been worshipped for so long, and it really is beautiful to think about in terms of like how you reflect back on your past and like how you are doing in your present. So like I was a pretty shitty person back in the day, and I think I'm a pretty good person now. So it's kind of cool to think about like what would that balance out to. Like maybe like since I tried to redeem myself by being a better person, would I come back as just another human to try again? And maybe have some spiritual memory to be like, all right, well, you better fucking be a good person, or next time you're coming back as like a fucking salamander or some dumb shit. But but I don't know. It's just one of those really cool beliefs, and I fucks with it heavy.
So it kind of sounds like you think of it more on like a spiritual level, and it's kind of tied to like your karma.
Yeah, I believe that. If it's in terms of like how it's viewed, I do think it's based off of your like karmic slate and karma. If you were a good person, you come back as something better or beautiful. If you were a bad person, you'd come back as a piece of shit.
Yeah, I'd like to believe that. I mean, when you think about it in terms like that, it gives you a drive to be a better person too. If you think, kind of like how I was talking about earlier, there's those people who want to be better people to get a better afterlife. And that's kind of the same thing, like you want to be better so that way you come back in your next life as something better. So
yeah, but it's based solely on like because karma in that kind of viewpoint is it knows if it has an opinion. It knows if your intentions are because you're selfish and you just don't want to get punished, or if you're genuinely just trying to be better. So like even if you were doing good things, given to charity, all that kind of shit, but that's just to bring your reputation up.
Yeah, if your only drive was to do it for yourself.
Yeah, then you would still come back as something fucking bad.
Okay. Well, along the lines of reincarnation, I think this helps explain what could happen. What just happened?
What could happen?
I had like a Minnesota accent there. Oh, what could happen to the animals there? I think this could help explain what happens to animals, because that's like never really brought up a lot when people talk about life and death. So I want to bring that up for a minute because we never really discussed what we think happens to animals. And that's why I kind of like to think reincarnation is possible, at least like on the sense of like what I was talking about, because it kind of gives animals an afterlife. Like I know some people believe like just dogs go to heaven and all that, but there's also people who don't think that literally any animals go to heaven or hell or whatever, and that doesn't make sense to me. They got to go somewhere. So let's kind of take a look at what some religions think happen to animals, starting off, of course, with Christianity. In Christianity, there's actually a lot of conflicting information as to whether or not animals are believed to go to heaven or hell. And it's because it appears that in most older texts or testaments, or however you want to say it, heaven and hell was reserved for those with sin and without sin. So, as animals were not believed to be born of sin because they weren't created in God's image, animals didn't go to heaven or hell. They didn't go anywhere. In fact, they were just believed to disappear, I guess, because they didn't have souls. And obviously, I could see how this didn't sit well with all those people who treat their pets as family, which, good for you if you do that. But obviously, those kind of people, would like to see them in their ideal heaven. So it appears as though that has changed in the more recent iterations of the Bible and other Christian texts. So, and I'm kind of guessing that that's why, because now when I was looking up stuff and researching, it says like, oh yeah, they for sure go to heaven. But and this is the weird thing too, it didn't mention like cows or horses or goats or any, kind of farm animals and stuff like that. It didn't mention any of that. It just mentioned pets. Well, so that's kind of what led me to think that, they changed this because people were complaining that, I want to see my pet in heaven with me next to God, and we're petting my dogs, and like, I could see why God wouldn't care about your dogs, but, whatever. Well, so yeah, but anyway, that's why I think they changed it.
Well, my cat is sure as shit not going to fucking heaven or hell. Like, I really hope that this cat just is erased from the fucking cosmos. Like, legitimately. I have a cat, and her name is Schrodinger. And I swear to God, I want to fucking just smack her against the wall, but I don't. Because I'm not a linity.
Please don't do that.
No, my cat's fine. She's just a kitten. But I don't know. It's one of those things that it's interesting to put in perspective of just a human's compassion, because I'm one of those people that I honestly, like, I have a cat, but I have a cat for my daughter. You know what I mean? I'm not very good with animals. And I figured that out a long time ago. I love animals. Like, if someone has a puppy, holy shit, man, I'll lose my goddamn mind. But like, at the same time, I'm not good for caring for dogs or cats or any really pets, just because I don't really put them as a priority. But a lot of people have, really high compassion for their dogs, and those dogs end up, being really smart. It is pretty in line with having kids, but just so you know, it's not like having a kid. So if you're one of those people, I don't care.
It's similar, but it's not. So yeah, I'm the same. Like, but I've had pets, and I've had, obviously I have a daughter. It's vastly different. So don't say it's the same. It's offensive to parents.
But in the same aspect of showing compassion towards an animal and stuff like that, it will respond better to you, just as if you show compassion to your children, they will respond better to you. And that's the kind of note that I'm bringing in. And as far as, even caring about your pet or your familiar's afterlife, it really is kind of cool to look into the human psyche, because that, having a, dog is fucking goes back to the caveman days, you know what I mean? So it's really cool to think about the aspect of where would they go, or would they come with us, or do they have their own heaven? Like, are we even in the same league and that kind of stuff? But
that's why I wanted to bring it up, because nobody talks about it.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get into a couple more different versions of heaven from different religions, because almost all versions of heaven are fucking amazing and interesting, and I don't know, they're like Nirvana, commonly associated with Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, and Sikhism. It represents its ultimate scale of soteriological release, the liberation from repeated rebirth, and samsara in Buddhism anyway, is the beginningless cycle of repeated birth, mundane existence, and dying again. So basically, it's eternal, like life and death is eternal as a cycle. In Indian religions, nirvana is synonymous with moksha and mukti, both being terms in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism for various forms of emancipation, enlightenment, release, and overall spiritual liberation. All Indian religions assert it to be a state of perfect quietude, freedom, highest happiness, as well as the liberation from or ending of samsara, the repeating cycle of birth, life, and death. So essentially, they're seeking to get out of the cycle through enlightenment. So it's almost like they view life and death as sort of hell. So like what we're viewing, and not really hell, but just because most of these are so apart from like materialistic beliefs and shit like that, that they don't want to care about that. Your goal in these religions is to not care about the physical realm and to find spiritual enlightenment to the point of ending this cycle. So that in itself is already really cool. In these religions with different variations, life is believed to be a cycle, like I said, in which all souls are in a never-ending chain of birth, death, and rebirth. Humans and animals both possess souls in Hindu belief, so there you go. So it is not out of the ordinary to believe that a human soul can become an animal during its rebirth, or vice versa. And obviously, if you couldn't tell, this is a form of reincarnation, just a more spiritual version as opposed to the one that Chris believes.
Yeah. So that is cool that Hindus think that. I'm sure other religions do too, but Hindus, think that, like, say your pet dog, if it died, it could become a person in the next life. And I don't know. That's really interesting. Like, to think about, like, because what if I was a dog or a cat? I mean, holy shit, this must be getting like furries excited.
Oh, dude, I'm excited.
Yeah. But so if you're bothered by Christian beliefs that your pet just dies and doesn't go anywhere, maybe try Hinduism. Side effects might include rejection by God, banishment from heaven, eternal damnation, and diarrhea. Ask your pastor today. In all seriousness, let's discuss some more examples of the afterlife. I already mentioned heaven and hell, and I'm sure most of you have an idea of what that is. So I'm not going to waste anybody's time going over heaven and hell. Instead, let's take a look at two other afterlives. One's more so of a heaven, one more of a hell. Sean, why don't you tell everyone about one of my personal favorite afterlives, Valhalla?
Well, Valhalla from Old Norse Valhall, Hall of the Slain, is a majestic, enormous hall located in Asgard, ruled over by the god Odin. Chosen by Odin, half of those who die in combat travel to Valhalla upon death, led by Valkyries, while the other half go to the goddess Freya's field, Folkvanger, or Folkvanger, which, by the way, these words are fucking bananas. It's just shit tons of consonants, so just bear with me. In Valhalla, the dead warriors join the masses of those who have died in combat, known as the Einherjar, and various legendary Germanic heroes and kings, as they prepare to aid Odin during the events of Ragnarok. So, get this, in Norse mythology's version of heaven, the prerequisites are to be the baddest motherfucker, the bravest motherfucker, and one loyal motherfucker. You get to get drunk as shit with other legendary warriors, and probably get to plow out tons of Scandinavian ass until the fucking day comes, where you get to kick ass in a legendary cosmic battle where fucking Odin, Thor, Tyr, Freyr, Heimdall, and Loki and a shit ton of other gods fucking die, and the world will resurface anew and fertile. The surviving and returning gods will meet, and the world will be repopulated by two human survivors, much like Adam and Eve in Christianity, because the old world was fucking super into incest. Anyway, that sounds like a dope-ass afterlife to me. Like, oh my god, man, imagine just all the Swedish ass.
Yeah, that's why it's my favorite, because it, like, this is like the ultimate reward. It's like, okay, well, if you're a bad motherfucker, basically you're just kicking ass and slaying puss all day when you're in your life, you get to just do that again in the afterlife, and that's it. You don't get fucked with, nothing else. You just get to plow some ass and drink some booze. That sounds great.
Yeah, but yeah, that sounds fucking amazing. But now I want to get into a super shitty afterlife that Chris loves, and I looked into a little bit. Dude, it's so fucking bad. And it's known as Shibala.
Yeah. And this is a favorite of mine just because of how weird and just interesting it is. But it's more of a hell-type afterlife. Xibalba is the underworld in Maya mythology. It's also known as the place of fear. Xibalba is ruled by the Mayan death gods. Xibalba is often described as a large cave-like city filled with many rivers. All who enter here would be met with like all sorts of tests, traps, and trials for you to have to like pass through. In fact, just one of the roads that leads to Xibalba is riddled with obstacles, and even one of the rivers is apparently filled with scorpions.
And pus. I fucking read that.
And pus.
That's fucking disgusting.
That sounds like a good time to me. I'm going to go ahead and assume that no one's down for a little late night skinny dip in the Xibalba River. And if they are, well, alright. That's mad kinky. Xibalba also served as a court for the dead and the aforementioned Mayan death gods, of which there were 12. It also housed those that the death gods have enslaved, as well as those who have traveled there of their own free will. As far as it's described, Xibalba is like an otherworldly place. Obviously, it's got fucking rivers with scorpions and pus. But it kind of sounds like you can just literally walk there, from what I've gathered. Just kind of take a little day trip, have a picnic with the family next to the scorpion rivers. Strangely, in the 16th century, the entrance to Xibalba was thought to be a cave system in the vicinity of Coban, Guatemala. That's right. People used to think that if you went far enough into this cave, you'd eventually find yourself in Xibalba. There were also some caves near Belize that were thought to be the entrance to Xibalba as well. And there's actually an article from an archaeologist who took a trip to these caves in Belize. And there's a section where she describes the caves having human skulls and bones like just littering the floor. So it's kind of easy to see where people could, still even today reference Xibalba when they're talking about these caves. And as always, I'll post a link to the article in case anyone here is interested in reading it. It's not long and not super engaging because it's written by a fucking archaeologist. But it's still somewhat interesting if you're, like a dork like I am. But not only did the ancient Mayans believe that the caves were the entrance to Xibalba, but they also thought that freshwater sinkholes were portals that could lead there as well. Xibalba itself was thought to be located just underneath the Earth's crust somewhere off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula. And to me, this is kind of why it's also so interesting, why Xibalba is so interesting, because it has this sort of like real-world presence. It's theoretically tangible, which I mean, I guess if we put it in terms of everything else, every other heaven is theoretically tangible, but this one, has an actual location that's described and everything. That makes it kind of cool. But anyway, that's enough about Xibalba. Let's move on to the final topic of today, and that is immortality. I saved the subject for last because I felt like it made more sense to talk about it last. We're talking about something everlasting, so why not have it at the end of the episode? To start us off, Sean, go ahead and provide us with a basic description like we normally do.
Alright, well, immortality is the ability to live forever or to possess eternal life, meaning obviously that one who is immortal cannot die. The reason this immortality is important to talk about along with the meaning of life and the afterlife should be fairly obvious, but if it isn't, that's okay, because that's what Papa Sean is here today to explain to you, my sweet little croissant, my little flaky little baby. God, I fucking love you. No, it's important because one who is immortal might view life and its meaning quite differently. Also, since they cannot die, an immortal would not experience an afterlife. Take the badass novel and film Interview with the Vampire. Obviously about vampires, by the end of the movie, Louis, Brad Pitt's character, who is a vampire, has a part where he talks about being bored and numb with life after he loses the vampire girl he loves, Claudia. Think about how much that would alter how you look at life. You're doomed to walk the earth forever after someone you love passes away. Everyone you know will pass away. Everything you know will pass away. And all the while, you're stuck experiencing it all, never getting a piece of death. And now, while all this seems like a really somber thing, that's not to say it would be without its advantages. Like we've discussed today, we know what happens after we die, or rather, we can only speculate, but no one knows for sure. It could be heaven, it could be rebirth, it could be fucking nothing. An immortal would have this fear absolutely removed from them. Can you imagine not having that fear of death? How fucking liberating that would be? Life would be your oyster, and time would be irrelevant to you. What need would there be to worry about time when you have endless amounts of it? Think of what you can accomplish just knowing that your time wasn't running out. Well, this idea has fascinated many others for centuries, hence the creation of the vampire, an undead creature who is immortal but must feed on human blood to sustain itself, an idea born of the fascination with immortality, or take the legend of the Fountain of Youth, a fabled spring whose water holds magical powers that restore youth and vitality to anyone who bathes or drinks from its waters. Not to be confused with the Fountain of Youth in St. Augustine, Florida. We're talking about the one from fucking Myths, so, you know.
Yeah, we don't care about the one in Florida. That one's probably dirty and it's got alligators in it. But speaking on the more scientific side of immortality for a moment, there are multiple theories and experiments that I believe could lead to immortality. One such experiment was conducted in Madrid, Spain, at the Spanish National Cancer Center. And I couldn't find out solid information. I think it was about 2008. But this was where they genetically engineered mice to produce 10 times more telomerase than normal. Telomerase is a naturally forming enzyme that helps maintain the protective caps at the end of chromosomes and could also prevent cells from dying. While these mice were given 10 times more telomerase, the ones that were given 10 times more telomerase actually lived 50% longer than just regular mice. So they may not have achieved immortality, but they definitely increased their lifespan. That's obviously a step in the right direction. Another form of scientific immortality is that of cryonics, which is the practice of freezing organisms in order to preserve them for possible future revival. Now, this is technically another example of life extension as opposed to immortality, but that's moreover the point. There isn't any known, or should I say publicly revealed, forms of immortality known to exist. Cryonics sees someone or something being frozen in order to prolong their life till a cure for a certain disease or something like that is found. Or, even immortality being discovered is, a thing. But for now, it's still just that, being placed on ice like a fish and forgotten about for a while. And before I confuse anyone, no, you can't be frozen alive and thawed out alive. In most cases, you die.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's not legal right now, at least on humans. In order for cryonics to be performed on a human, they have to be deceased. This isn't Futurama. So, suffice it to say, immortality isn't in the books for us, at least right now. Who knows what we might discover or create in the future. But right now, we're all on different roads leading to the same location, and who knows what that location is. We'll all find out in our own time. But still, talking about immortality, one last scientific approach is mind-to-computer uploading. And that's exactly what it sounds like. Uploading one's consciousness into a computer in order to continue living as a machine. Well, we'll actually be discussing that one in a different episode. So if that interests you, stay tuned to find out more about that subject. But now I kind of want to talk about like movies and games and books that include immortality and ones that are like our personal favorites. So Sean, what's one of your favorite movies or games or books that has to do with immortality?
Well, actually, the telomerase thing actually reminded me of Wolverine from X-Men, specifically Logan, when he dies, because the whole premise of it was that he got poisoning from his adamantium in his skeleton. Spoilers, by the way. But if you haven't watched Logan, I don't fucking care. Who cares? But basically, what I looked into, because he is immortal, but telomerase is more of like it's kind of at the end of, it's almost like a fuse. So think of it as a fuse at the end of your genetic code. Wolverine, he had a non-stop regeneration and stuff for his for any wounds, or even fucking like down to the fact that he could get ripped apart and still come back.
Yeah.
In the comics, it gets fucking way like he gets his head cut off and comes back, similar to like Deadpool and shit like that. And essentially with Wolverine, the whole theory that I looked into with him, he the fuse of the telomerase kind of got thinner and thinner and thinner until finally he's like hundreds of years old. Because I think he was born in like 1800s Canada, and Logan's supposed to be like around 2020 or some shit like that. So basically, the theory is that his telomerase just ran out. So finally, like he could have gotten adamantium poisoning, but that's because there was nothing really regenerating him. That's why his regeneration was, not as responsive anymore. That's why he was actually physically aging, getting gray hairs, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's just Logan. Another one's like BioShock Infinite. It's not really immortality. It's more of like an endless loop, kind of like the multiverse thing that we got into in the last episode. BioShock Infinite, essentially the main character, Booker DeWitt, is in this endless loop, essentially never getting out, and in other words, basically immortal, until he decides to end it at the end of the game by killing himself, which is kind of what is in the same realm as vampires, because even in an interview with the vampires can die. Immortal doesn't mean invincible. It just means that physically, without any alterations or altercations, you wouldn't die. Or with vampires, rather, you can get fucked up and still come back, but there's ways to kill them.
Yeah.
Another one, and God, I know you'll agree with me on this shit, is Dark Souls. Because
Absolutely.
fuck, Dark Souls is it brings immortality in with almost the way of the world, because in Dark Souls, the world how it is essentially run from the spirit of the earth, which is called the kiln of the first flame. So just imagine this flame, which is essentially in the center of their of the earth or whatever, is the heart of the world and everything that is on the world. And as this flame dims, it blurs the line between light and dark and life and death. And the first one, there's plenty of them, and they pretty much recycled the same idea in the trilogy. But the first one pretty much nailed it on the head, because your character itself is undead. But being undead means that you died, or this character died, and is now undead, because the flame dying, and the heart of the world essentially dying, is blurring the lines of life and death. So when you die, you just can't, because that's just how the world is right now.
Yep.
And it's just a really cool concept. And I mean, Dark Souls has plenty of different things about immortality as well. Like with the gods in the game are essentially immortal as well. Immortal, not invincible. And yeah, it goes into it. It goes into immortality, life itself being cyclical, routines and patterns of life being cyclical, and that in itself is just really fucking cool. Interview with the Vampire again. Like I said before, it's one of those movies that it really brings in the idea of the purpose of your life without having someone to love or having emotional connections, because essentially what that movie and that book itself brings into it is you can be immortal and it doesn't fucking matter without these emotional connections, because that's the only thing to live for.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that's just a really good sentiment. It's a fucking great book and a great movie. And another one is In Time with Justin Timberlake. Fucking not a good movie, but an amazing idea. The idea behind it was really cool. In Time is Justin Timberlake and I almost said Crispin Glover. That's not Crispin Glover. What the fuck's his name? He looks a lot like him in what the fuck's his name? He played Scarecrow in
Cillian Murphy.
Cillian Murphy, thank you. And essentially, time itself is currency, and you have a watch on like embedded in your skin, and when that clock runs out, you die. But if it is full with time, if it has 100 years left on the clock, you're gonna live for 100 years, and it's traded as currency. So if you want to buy a coffee, it's 5 minutes. If you want to take a bus ride, it's 10 minutes. If you want to buy food, it's 20 minutes. That kind of shit, and it brings in the idea of mixing time is money. Of course, that's pretty much the whole premise of the movie, but
Yep.
it brings in the really cool idea of the value of economics as well as immortality, because the upper class in that movie are essentially immortal because they're fucking rich as balls. They're not dying anytime soon, and it's insurgence of or revolution rather of Justin Timberlake and his girlfriend or whatever her name is. I completely forget. I'm sorry, but essentially is that everyone should be immortal or no one should be. And pretty much the idea of it is no one should be. There's even a character in there that has lived in for 110 years and basically got sick of it and died. And Justin Timberlake ends up with all of his time, and it makes him a target. Like I said, it's not that great of a movie. But watch it just because the idea of it is really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool concept.
And I think Chris has one. It's another From Software game. And I'm gonna have to agree with him. But go ahead, Chris, because I know you want to talk about it because you played it more recently than I have.
Yeah, my favorite example of Immortality is a game, and I'm currently on my second, almost third playthrough, and that's Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. If you're a gamer and you haven't played it, then shame on you and your family. Dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow. No, but for real, that game is an absolute masterpiece. It's pure fucking art.
Yeah. And
without giving too much away, Sekiro has just tons to do with immortality. I mean, the whole main story is just about immortality. From drinking magical water to, bestowing a power of immortality from one person to another to being infested by an immortal centipede.
Yeah.
There's a number of ways that immortality is achieved in Sekiro, but check it out for yourself. It's amazing. If you play the game and you don't understand it, there's a ton of YouTube videos to help you understand it, and that's actually what I had to do. And they explained it beautifully, and it just makes the game so much more beautiful when you understand the story too.
Mm-hmm. Same with Dark Souls, because when you play Dark Souls and pretty much any From Software game, which is the company that makes Sekiro and Dark Souls and Bloodborne. Bloodborne has a lot to do with the life being cyclical as well, or patterns being cyclical. But yeah, look up the lore for Sekiro and Dark Souls because they're so similar, but they're also so unique in their own ways. Fuck.
Yeah. I'm just infatuated with the Japanese culture and style and all that stuff. So I don't know, it's really cool. So if you like that stuff, definitely check it out. Like I said, even if you're not a gamer, just check out the YouTube videos of that stuff because it's really interesting story-wise. If you're into books or anything like that, it's really cool stuff.
Yeah.
But as far as a movie, you already mentioned Interview with the Vampire, and that movie is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Literally one of my favorites. On the other end of that spectrum, though, Highlander is one of the dumbest fucking movies about immortality ever. I don't care. Fuck you if you like Highlander. That movie is a mess. The acting is awful. The plot is awful. The setting is awful. And the fucking casting is awful. Holy shit. Who would have thought that casting Christopher Lambert as your main character wouldn't be a good idea? And for those of you who don't know who he is, which good for you, he's the same dude that ruined Raiden in the 1990s. I think it came out in 94 or 93.
Hey. You didn't like his little...
No. He ruined that movie because he had to do that stupid chuckle after everything. He's like, he was fucking telling some cool joke or something, but instead he's saying some stupid line. But if that wasn't bad enough, there was Sean Connery, and I'm not talking bad about Sean Connery. I'm not talking shit about him as an actor, but I am criticizing the fucking absolute imbecile who casted him to play a Spaniard. You casted the most Scottish sounding actor ever to play a fucking Spaniard. That's like casting Desi Arnaz to play a German soldier in a World War II film. Hola, señorita, and Heil Hitler. Lucy, I'm off to invade Poland. like, sorry to all you young listeners, by the way. That's a very old reference.
Yeah.
But just the person in charge of casting, like, what a fucking absolute muppet. I can't get over that. Like, I mean, me and my friend Zach were talking about it the other day, and we didn't even bring up Highlander. We were just talking about like movies or something that came up because of how fucking awful that casting choice was. But anyway, I'm sure there's like a million other movies or games or whatever that I'll think of later. But right now, that's all I got. Like, I Love You, Sekiro, and Interview with the Vampire. Fuck you, Highlander.
Yeah, but there can be only one, man.
Yeah, unfortunately, there wasn't only one. They made like 3 fucking sequels. That god-awful movie.
Did they?
Yeah, I think there's like 3 at least. I don't know if they all have the same actors. Like, I don't think Sean Connery's in any of them because I'm pretty sure he dies in the first one. I don't remember. I don't really care. Fuck Highlander lore.
I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here, but you know it's a fucking bad movie because I'm pretty sure the first time I watched it I was like 8 or 9, and our mom was... I think she made me watch it, or rather, she thought I would like it, which, by the way, Mom, if you're listening, no, I never like anything you fucking show me. I appreciate your love, but I'm not watching True Blood, I'm not watching The 100, and stop recommending shows for me that I'm not going to fucking watch, and you know I'm not going to watch it. And Highlander is trash, by the way. It's just so bad. But it's almost the same as, what the fuck is a movie? It's like Predator 2. Holy fuck.
Don't get me started on Predator 2.
Like, tell me, and look at me in the fucking eyes and tell me that Predator 2 was a good fucking movie. No one can.
It's a predator in the concrete jungle.
Oh, fuck. Anyway, I kind of want to go back. I kind of want to go back to the idea of the purpose of life. I had a Marcus Aurelius quote before in the episode, and I wanted to kind of go into practicing Stoicism and cynicism. Do you know what those are specifically?
Well, I know Stoic means to be like without emotion, even though you're experiencing emotion. And I know cynicism obviously is like, not. Well, I mean, maybe I'm right. Like not finding value in certain things anymore, like kind of being numb to everything. Yeah. So I don't know what the practice of Stoicism is. I mean, obviously cynicism kind of explains itself a little, but yeah, Stoicism I'm kind of interested on because I don't know if there's like some sort of actual practice for it. I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Well, Stoicism is essentially acknowledging the fact that life is trash, but trying your best to make it better. So it's essentially being an optimist, but it's almost refusing anger as an emotion. It's refusing sadness as an emotion, or rather, it basically kind of brings it more into like cold analytical. So if you start your day, Marcus Aurelius did this. He was a old king. I think a Greek king, I'm pretty sure. I'm not quite sure.
The name sounds Roman.
He might be Roman, I'm not sure. I know he pretty much lived by the rules and philosophies of Epictetus, who was I'm pretty sure was Greek, I'm not sure. Message us if I'm wrong, but overall I think I'm right, just about the ideals and stuff, so, Yeah. I don't have all this right now is improv, so just give us some credit.
Yeah, we don't have any notes on this stuff, so.
But yeah, Marcus Aurelius was a fucking a king, and let's put it into perspective. He had another, I think, a general or someone who betrayed him, and when he got betrayed, most kings would lose their absolute fucking mind. And would be like, all right, well, I'm going to go fucking kill you. And instead, he told everyone, in the kingdom, like, hey, we got betrayed, but it's okay. We're gonna go apprehend him, and I just want to talk to him. And he was one of those people that he knew that people were out to get him, and he just almost didn't care, or he didn't want to be. He didn't want to meet anger with anger. He didn't fight fire with fire. So if someone betrayed him, I can't remember the context in which this dude betrayed him, but instead he apprehended him, and I think he even made amends with the general. And that's fucking unheard of. And
Yeah, especially back then. Like back then, you fucked somebody over, it was just death.
yeah, and he was one of the few kings to I forgot. I'm pretty sure it was Greece because he like secured the entire empire essentially, kind of like what Agamemnon did or was trying to do, and he succeeded by being like a benevolent and patient ruler.
Hey, look at that! If you're good and you do things right by other people, it kind of turns out good for everybody.
Yeah. And it's almost it's a point. I think it was Socrates, or not sure. I think it was Socrates who said, philosophers should be kings, and Marcus Aurelius is a fucking big 1-0 to that. Because it's just it's history, and he made a lot of memoirs on his life, but he lived by the philosophies of Epictetus, who was a big Stoic, who was like probably the most famous Stoic, but he doesn't have a lot of written works, so you kind of have to default to Marcus Aurelius.
Okay.
But yeah, he was very patient. He was kind, and he was definitely the pinnacle of a human being, because I mean he even dealt with chronic back pain, and essentially he made no complaints because he almost lived life as it is what it is, and I'm not going to meet my pain with more pain by bringing anger to it. And on the opposite end, or kind of opposite end, but still a good sentiment, is cynicism. Now, cynics nowadays it's pretty much just met with like, you're just a negative person, or you don't give a shit about certain things, and you don't care what people think about that. Now, that is technically true. Like an old philosopher named Diogenes, he was a cynic. And dude, I'm sorry, but Diogenes is the most badass motherfucker on the planet. He lived in a barrel, not kidding. And he wanted to live as a dog does, which is in the moment. He didn't give...
Oh yeah, I've heard about this.
Yeah, he didn't give a shit about materials or anything else. He wanted his whole life to be always focused on the present. Never the future, never the past. Whatever happened yesterday was yesterday. No one fucking cares. He wanted to live life literally as a dog, or, as close to a dog as a human can get. And even to the point where Alexander the Great came and met with Diogenes, and he asked him, is there anything I can do for you? Because Alexander the Great really, really respected Diogenes. And Alexander the Great asked him if he could do anything for him. Now,
yeah, I remember this.
This is a big fucking king, or, ruler, fucking conqueror, who's literally giving you an IOU. And Diogenes basically just said, well, move because you're in the way of the sun. That's my favor. And how fucking badass is that? Like, one of the most vicious fucking kings and rulers, conquerors ever in history, gives you an IOU, and you're just like, can you just like move a little to your left? That'd be great.
Yeah. It's like a big, subtle FU. And also just like I don't give a shit. Just move. Just get out of my way. Pretty much.
Because he didn't care.
Like, I don't need your favor, almost is what he's saying.
Yeah, and it's, and I'm pretty sure Alexander the Great knew that.
Yeah, probably.
Because, he, like I said, he was a big fan of Diogenes. But it's one of those things that it's so amazing to think about life in that way, is that if you're a Stoic, or if you want to practice Stoicism, You have to get up and acknowledge the fact, like, hey, there's a fucking 90% chance, or there's a really good chance that someone's going to piss me off today, or someone's going to be mean or angry, someone's going to cut me off in traffic, whatever. Something bad is going to happen today, whether I like it or not. And I have to not meet that with anger. I have to meet it with understanding, rather.
Yeah.
And being a cynic is basically putting, I mean, not to the level of Diogenes, but putting all the value in something, and only the things that you care about. It's almost being selfish, but it's pretty admirable in my eyes, because I'm one of those people, that I'm not very confrontational, and
Yeah.
but I am very stubborn. So I, like, with my computer that I'm recording on right now, I don't want anybody to touch it. I don't want anybody to fucking even look at it, get on it. Same thing with just my car. My car is not even fucking nice. But my computer and my car are literally the only two things, material things, that I care about. Everything else I don't really care about. And it's almost like living as a minimalist. It's getting to the point where you're like, I only really need two or three things,
Yeah.
because it brings utility, and because A, B, and C. He only really needed to, Diogenes only really needed food and shelter, and that's it. And that's why he lived in a barrel, because it brought him shelter in the night, and against the rain and stuff like that. And he only needed food. Diogenes was famous for literally shitting in the fucking street because he was a goddamn baller. So, I mean, it's just really cool to think of life that way. And Stoicism also is, whenever you respect, Stoicism on the other end is, since you show everyone that same respect, that golden rule, you don't want to be fucked with, so you shouldn't fuck with anybody else. It's acknowledging that you could literally die at any moment, and you don't want to leave anything bad on a karmic slate, essentially.
Hmm.
What do you think about Diogenes and Marcus Aurelius, as far as their practices?
I'm like you. I really really respect Diogenes for doing that, like living that minimalist kind of lifestyle. Because I mean, I think when you live like that, there's no way that you don't have some sort of epiphany about life. Because if you think about how absorbed we are by all of the stuff that's in our lives now, like, I mean, fuck, I can't even think of a moment in my day where I'm not on my phone or my computer or on my TV, something like that. I mean, back then they didn't have this kind of stuff, but they had something similar. They had something that was eating up their lives. And he rejected all of that just to kind of find out what was important, it literally sounds like he was just looking for the meaning of life.
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, he rejected everything outside of what the base needs are. And I think that's like the best way to find out what the meaning of life is, shove aside everything that we're used to clouding our minds, and just living off of what needs to be needed. And that's all he did. He's like, I need shelter, need food, I need to shit in the fucking street.
Yeah.
It's
I mean,
it's cool. It's literally, and that takes a strong person to do that. It takes a really strong person to do that. I'm somebody who watches a lot of like those reality survival shows. This doesn't even get close to touching like what he did, to be able to just literally have nothing but shelter and scrounging for yourself. Like everything in these reality TV shows is all, they have some shit handed to them. So I mean, it's huge respect to Diogenes.
yeah. And it's still practiced today, pretty commonly. People just don't know that they are, like, I'm sure you heard, like, a lot of, like, 18, 20-year olds that literally just get in their car and fucking drive, and that's it. They'll
Yeah,
figure it out, and that's essentially being a modern day Diogenes. And whoever
yeah,
does that, seriously, big respect to you. In today's society, honestly, it is dumb, but being by yourself is so fucking valuable, for a certain amount of time, because you get to find what you value without anybody else's interpretation being handed to you. I mean,
Mhm.
for a small amount of time, I was without my daughter and I lived with my mom and I worked graveyards. So I was by myself a lot. And just in that time for about a year, um, I found value in what I respect and what I wanted to do. And I decided I wanted to be an entertainer of some sort. Me and me and Chris, have gone in on stories together. Chris, has gone in on stories by himself. I've gone in on stories by myself. Nothing published or anything like that, but it's just something that we're always fascinated about because we like telling a good story. We also like telling people what is. That's the whole point of this podcast. We like telling people what is, and also taking our own spin on it because opinions are very valuable. And it's that kind of shit that I found out I wanted to do, and I wanted to do it and also make people laugh while I do it. And I wouldn't have known that if I had constantly been around, my mom 100% of the time, my daughter's mom 100% of the time, and being alone is very valuable to how you think about life.
Yeah. So on that line of thinking too, I will tell anybody who's having, any tough time figuring out what they're doing with themselves, take that time to distance yourself from people and things, just all sorts of outside influence, because that self-reflection time is really the most important. You're the person that knows yourself the best, and sometimes we don't take enough time to talk to ourselves. And that's always where I've found the most self-growth, is just when I've taken that time to kind of ostracize myself and just kind of like reject everybody else and take some time to self-reflect. I've had plenty of times in my life where I've been going through some difficult times, and I was the person that kind of got myself through it because I took some time to listen to myself and my own advice. And once you don't have all these other outside opinions and outside influences, getting to you, it is a lot easier to figure out things and make up your own mind. But I will say, in that same kind of thing, if the talks that you have with yourself only lead to depression, then talk to somebody. Don't feed into that. If you need help, get help.
Yeah, don't let yourself defeat yourself, because you are your greatest fucking enemy, but you're also your greatest ally, and you need to make yourself an ally.
Yeah, because I will say, I mean, talking about the meaning of life and stuff like that, I've done a lot of self-reflect on that sort of thing, and a lot more times than I'd like to admit, it led me to down a hole of kind of depression because I couldn't find value in life. And when you're like that, you really just need to talk to other people. That's when your advice is no longer valid. If you're not giving yourself good advice, then you need to seek other advice. So if you're getting there, talk to somebody, please.
Yeah.
Don't do anything drastic. Call whoever. Email us. We'll talk to you. I'm fucking always down to talk to somebody, if especially if you need help. So
yeah, we both have had our own very severe bouts with depression. So if you are if you are feeling that kind of feeling and you just don't have the balls to call a suicide hotline or anything like that, because I understand it seems a bit odd to call them. I've done it. And they're a really good organization, but it's a weird thing to wrap your head around, acknowledging that you need help. So if anything, you can always call us. We don't have to, or message us rather. I mean, we don't have to put it on the show. Obviously, we'll just message you back and we'll talk it out. And say if you want to talk to specifically me, Sean, or do you want to specifically talk to Chris? And it's very, very important that you make sure that you are in a good mental state.
yeah.
Anyways, what about Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus, the teachings of Epictetus, Stoicism in general? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like I kind of agree with it and then kind of don't, because like emotion is what makes us different from animals. It's what separates us from a lot of stuff. So, I mean, I think rejecting showing emotion and displaying emotion to other people and stuff like that, or just trying to not feel something when you should. I don't know if I agree with that sort of thing, with like the stoicism thing. Cynicism I can kind of get, because I mean, I think we're all a little bit cynical sometimes. And I will admit that I have been a bit stoic sometimes too, where I'm in a situation where I know I should show emotion and I just don't. And I kind of think that that's part of being a guy though too. Like, there's always a little bit of stoicism embedded into every male. So it's no wonder that a male from back then, kind of brought this about. But yeah, I think we should try to move away from it, because, and we didn't talk about this earlier, but love is a big, big factor in life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I'm pretty sure anybody could agree that, it's one of the driving forces in a human's life, at least, to bring meaning to life. So I feel like if you practice stoicism, you're kind of rejecting love a little bit too, just because you're rejecting emotion, basically. So,
well, I
like the ideals of it, but I don't know if I would practice it myself.
Well, it's somewhere in the middle. So whenever I explain stoicism, I do understand taking it as being basically an emotionalist person, but it's more acknowledging the fact that today's not going to be perfect, and that in itself is true. So it's more acknowledging the fact that if today is shitty, then it's just shitty. There's nothing really you can do about it. You're not in control of everything. So it's not necessarily not feeling emotion. It's not overreacting on those emotions. So that's where I take it anyway. And that's, Marcus Aurelius was still a king. I'm sure he fucking killed and conquered plenty of places. But, whenever you put it into the terms of like waking up and being like, all right, well, today might be shit. It might be good. And I'm going to take everything with a grain of salt. It's more just, like I said, making sure that you don't overreact when something happens. And that I do value, because I am the kind of person, I am non-confrontational, but I do think that a lot of situations that people become confrontational over, you don't have to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's always a better, less violent or less confrontational solution to things.
Yeah. But yeah, stoicism and cynicism, both great practices. Cynicism, especially for younger people, like 18, 20, college years kind of person that just strikes out on their own and wants to discover themselves. I'm all for it. Stoicism, I'm also all for it. But you have to actively practice these or switch between the two. And I mean, there's plenty of other practices you can do too. A lot of people take from religious practices. That doesn't necessarily mean you're religious. That just means that you value the time or meditation within your own head, or the time with others, the opinions of others, and finding the balance between the two. Anyway, we're pretty much out of time, so Chris, if you want to start wrapping it up.
Yeah. So I'll just say, the takeaway from today's episode is, the meaning of life is kind of what you make it. We all have our opinions on what is important to us in life and things like that. And, it really just varies from person to person. So, like I said, if you aren't sure what the meaning of life is for yourself, take some time to self-reflect. If it leads you down a dark path, talk to somebody. If it leads you to the, the good side of things, then start practicing talking to yourself more often.
Mm-hmm.
But, anyway, that about wraps up today's episode of Templars. Templars. I can't even say our own title. Today's episode of Tipplers 2 Cents. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed it. As always, please leave a review on whatever platform you're listening on, and please continue to spread the word. Remember, we're available on pretty much all platforms now. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and now we're on iHeartRadio and YouTube. So you name it, we're probably on it.
Yeah, and make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for additional content. Facebook.com/Tipplers2cents and Instagram at Tipplers2cents. for additional content and posts to keep you up to date on upcoming episodes. We also post pictures kind of summarizing out of context what we talked about in the episode. And it's kind of funny. I think it's funny anyway. But yeah. Stay tuned every Monday for a new episode. Don't forget to reach out to us with any feedback or additional information at tipplerstwocenspodcast@gmail.com.
And once again, thank you guys all so much. We'll see you all in the afterlife. Cowabunga.
Thou knowst 'tis common, all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity. Or something like that. Later, guys.
Bye.